That's perfectly balanced if it's just for entertainment. But if you can entertain and educate, that's even better. And if you can entertain, educate, and elevate, that's the goal. Mel Gibson is known for blockbusters like Braveheart, Lethal Weapon, and the deeply controversial The Passion of the Christ, films that defined Hollywood excellence and pushed cultural boundaries. But in the summer of 2006, his narrative took a sudden and dark turn. Just hours after wrapping up a high-profile interview, the Oscar-winning director found himself in handcuffs on the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu. What was supposed to be a standard celebrity press cycle instantly morphed into one of the most notorious public relations disasters in Hollywood history. So what exactly happened that night? Join us as we get into the details. Long before he was making headlines on the Pacific Coast Highway, Mel Gerard Gibson was just a kid from the New York suburbs. Born on January 3, 1956, in Peekskill, New York, Mel grew up in a bustling household as the sixth of 11 children. His parents, Hutton and Patricia Gibson, raised their large family with deep ties to their Irish-American roots. In fact, Mel's unique names were directly inspired by Irish saints, a nod to his mother's hometown of Longford, Ireland. Showbiz and success seemed to linger in his DNA. His grandmother was an accomplished opera singer, and his grandfather made a fortune in the tobacco industry. But life took a dramatic turn for the Gibson family in 1968. After winning a $145,000 lawsuit for a workplace injury, a fortune worth well over $1 million in today's money, Mel's father decided it was time for a fresh start. He packed up the family and moved them halfway across the world to New South Wales, Australia. Mel was just 12 years old when he arrived in his grandmother's homeland. The move wasn't purely financial, it was also a deliberate strategy by his father to keep Mel's oldest brother far from the Vietnam War draft. Settled in Australia, young Mel spent his teenage years getting an education from the Christian Brothers at St. Leo's Catholic College. It didn't take long for Australia to shape him, and for him to go on to shape the world of cinema. When Mel first burst onto the acting scene, Hollywood's elite and film critics immediately took notice. Legendary critic Vincent Canby raved about him, claiming the young actor had that rare, undefinable star quality, reminiscent of a young Steve McQueen. Others saw a magnetic blend of old-school icons like Clark Gable and Humphrey Bogart. That raw charisma quickly locked him into Hollywood's A-list, especially after he starred in the gritty Mad Max series, the moving wartime drama Gallipoli, and the wildly successful Lethal Weapon franchise, permanently cementing his status as the ultimate global action hero. Yet Mel refused to be put in a box. He actively fought against typecasting, even turning down the legendary role of James Bond despite Sean Connery's personal endorsement. Instead, he chose to stretch his range, pivoting flawlessly into deep human dramas like Hamlet and crowd-pleasing romantic comedies like What Women Want. Not content with just being the face in front of the camera, Mel stepped behind it, transitioning into a powerhouse director and producer. He delivered cinematic epics like Braveheart and the intense Apocalypto. By the turn of the millennium, he was being compared to icons like Cary Grant and Robert Redford, a Hollywood golden boy who had conquered the industry entirely on his own terms. But long before he was directing massive epics or dominating the global box office, Mel was just a struggling artist looking for a breakthrough. He studied at the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Sydney, where he and future star Judy Davis tackled the leads in Romeo and Juliet. He even played the fairy queen Titania in an experimental production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. When he graduated in 1977, he hit the ground running. He snagged his movie debut in a film called Summer City, walking away with a grand total of $400. That same year, he landed the title role in Mad Max. It paid him just $9,000, but it would change his life forever. Even with a major movie under his belt, Mel wasn't living the glamorous Hollywood lifestyle just yet. He stayed grounded in the theater world, joining the State Theatre Company of South Australia. During this time, he shared a cramped $30 a week apartment in Adelaide with his future wife, Robin Moore. To keep the lights on, he took a role as a young man with an intellectual disability in the film Tim, and picked up guest spots on Australian TV shows like The Sullivans and Cop Shop. Mel kept his theatrical roots alive for years, eventually sharing the stage with Geoffrey Rush. By the mid-1980s, America was calling. Mel made his big Hollywood debut alongside Sissy Spacek in the 1984 drama The River, playing a struggling Tennessee farmer. He followed that up with the gothic romance Mrs. Soffel, but the intense schedule caught up with him. After churning out 4 films back-to-back, Mel packed his bags and took a 2-year break at his Australian cattle station to clear his head. That break worked wonders. He returned to the screen in 1987 as the unhinged Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon, a mega-hit that permanently cemented his status as a Hollywood leading man. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of him. He dominated the box office with Tequila Sunrise and Lethal Weapon 2, and by 1990, he was so in demand that he released 3 major films in a single year: Bird on a Wire, Air America, and Hamlet. Throughout the 1990s, Mel masterfully balanced big-budget blockbusters with personal passion projects. Audiences loved him in Forever Young, Maverick, and Ransom, and he even lent his voice to John Smith in Disney's Pocahontas. By the year 2000, Mel was commanding a record-breaking $25 million salary to star in The Patriot. He was an absolute box office king, with Chicken Run and What Women Want both crossing the $100 million mark that same year. In 2002, he starred in the sci-fi thriller Signs, which became the highest-grossing acting role of his entire career. But at the absolute peak of his fame, Mel grew tired of the spotlight. During the Signs press tour, he confessed he no longer wanted to be a movie star and would only act again if a script were truly extraordinary. He wasn't lying. Mel shifted his focus behind the camera, founding Icon Productions and making his directorial debut with The Man Without a Face in 1993. But it was his sophomore project, Braveheart, that shook the industry, earning him the Academy Award for Best Director. In 2004, he directed The Passion of the Christ, a deeply personal film shot entirely in Aramaic and Latin. Despite massive controversy, the film became a historic box office juggernaut, pulling in over $370 million in the US alone. He followed that with Apocalypto in 2006, another intense, sparse dialogue epic. Unfortunately, just as his directing career soared, his personal life began to unravel. A string of toxic, highly public outbursts and controversial statements shattered his golden boy image. In 2010, after a recording of a furious fight with his ex-girlfriend leaked online, his powerful talent agency, William Morris Endeavor, dropped him immediately. Hollywood turned its back. He was even removed from the cast of The Hangover Part 2 after the crew protested his involvement. Mel went from a $25 million leading man to playing quirky villains in films like Machete Kills and The Expendables 3. Yet Mel refused to completely disappear. He slowly rebuilt his career, directing the critically acclaimed war drama Hacksaw Ridge in 2016 and the thriller Flight Risk in 2026. He also expanded Icon Productions into a global distribution powerhouse and served as executive producer on the breakout 2023 hit Sound of Freedom. Mel Gibson's journey has been a wild, unpredictable ride, a story of unmatched Hollywood highs, self-inflicted rock bottoms, and a relentless drive to create art on his own terms. But while Gibson managed to rebuild his career after his public downfalls, the actor who brought his most controversial vision to life wasn't nearly as lucky. The historic box office success of Gibson's religious epic came with a devastating price for its leading man, effectively derailing his career the moment the film hit theaters. In the summer of 2004, Mel Gibson released The Passion of the Christ, and it instantly ignited a global debate. The film focuses entirely on the final 12 hours of Jesus' life, with actor Jim Caviezel in the leading role, and audiences were completely divided. Some praised it as a brilliant religious masterpiece, others called it offensive and gratuitously violent. But all that public controversy just made people curious, which drove the film to break box office records and become the highest-grossing R-rated movie in U.S. history. Behind the massive success, critics and religious leaders were furious, arguing that the film gave hate groups ammunition to spread anti-Semitic narratives. Many felt Gibson bypassed the actual history of Jesus simply to shock audiences with extreme violence, and experts quickly noted that numerous scenes didn't align with scripture. In the Bible, Jesus is known for love and kindness, but this film focuses almost entirely on pain, suffering, and fear. The historical departures begin in the very first scene, where Jesus prays in a dark garden and a cloaked figure representing Satan appears. A giant snake slithers out, and Jesus steps on its head, a visually striking moment that never actually occurs anywhere in the New Testament. Gibson also employed horror movie techniques to build suspense, such as a scene during the whipping sequence where the camera cuts to Satan cradling a pale, deformed demon baby, an image entirely invented for dramatic effect with no basis in any religious text. The crucifixion sequence gets the Hollywood treatment as well. The film shows Jesus carrying the full weight of the heavy wooden cross, when historians note that condemned criminals only carried the crossbeam. Scholars also debate whether Jesus was nailed to the wood at all, since Romans often used ropes to prolong suffering. Even the appearance of the characters isn't historically accurate. Jim Caviezel has fair skin and a neat beard, yet historians agree that a man living in the Middle East 2,000 years ago would have had a much darker complexion. On top of that, the film shows Jesus speaking fluent Latin to the Roman governor, when a local carpenter would have known only a few basic words at best, and a flashback even depicts a young Jesus building a modern dining table, when people of that era actually ate seated on the floor. The biggest controversy centered on anti-Semitism. The ultimate irony is that Jesus himself was born and died Jewish, yet the film completely ignores this fact, framing Jewish characters as the primary villains. Gibson depicted a bloodthirsty Jewish crowd demanding maximum suffering, which religious leaders condemned for reinforcing dangerous ancient prejudices. Because the script was so divisive, mainstream Hollywood studios refused to distribute it, forcing Gibson to fund and release the film with his own money. As the backlash grew louder, the film's PR team attempted to leverage the Pope's name by circulating a rumor that Pope John Paul II had watched the film and said, "It is as it was." The Vatican eventually issued a statement clarifying that the Pope does not give public reviews of artworks. They confirmed he had watched the film but declined to say whether he ever made that famous comment. At its core, the film is defined by its unrelenting brutality. Audience members reportedly had intense physical reactions, crying, fainting, and in some cases vomiting. One woman in Kansas suffered a fatal heart attack during the crucifixion sequence, and renowned critic Roger Ebert flatly stated it was the most violent film he had ever seen. While the controversy made Mel Gibson enormously wealthy, it completely derailed Jim Caviezel's career. Before playing Jesus, Caviezel had been a rising star with leading roles in hits like The Count of Monte Cristo. He later told a church congregation that Hollywood blacklisted him after the film's release, and the truly striking part is that Mel Gibson had actually warned him it would happen. 20 minutes after offering him the role, Gibson called Caviezel back and urged him not to take it, saying, "You'll never work in this town again." Caviezel took the risk anyway, driven by personal faith, and although his mainstream career was effectively ended, he says he has no regrets and holds no grudge against Gibson. But this wouldn't be the last time Gibson's cinematic world collided with real-life chaos. Just a few years after his religious epic divided audiences, his private life completely imploded, exposing a toxic behind-the-scenes relationship that would leave the entire entertainment industry in shock. At its core, the film is defined by its unrelenting brutality. Audience members reportedly had intense physical reactions, crying, fainting, and in some cases vomiting. One woman in Kansas suffered a fatal heart attack during the crucifixion sequence, and renowned critic Roger Ebert flatly stated it was the most violent film he had ever seen. While the controversy made Mel Gibson enormously wealthy, it completely derailed Jim Caviezel's career. Before playing Jesus, Caviezel had been a rising star with leading roles in hits like The Count of Monte Cristo. He later told a church congregation that Hollywood blacklisted him after the film's release, and the truly striking part is that Mel Gibson had actually warned him it would happen. 20 minutes after offering him the role, Gibson called Caviezel back and urged him not to take it, saying, "You'll never work in this town again." Caviezel took the risk anyway, driven by personal faith, and although his mainstream career was effectively ended, he says he has no regrets and holds no grudge against Gibson. But this wouldn't be the last time Gibson's cinematic world collided with real-life chaos. Just a few years after his religious epic divided audiences, his private life completely imploded, exposing a toxic behind-the-scenes relationship that would leave the entire entertainment industry in shock. Mel Gibson has always been one of Hollywood's most sought-after stars, but while his professional life has almost always thrived, his personal life has been just as relentlessly covered by the media. Right now, the headlines are buzzing again. Mel is single and reportedly ready to move on. Sources close to the star say the 70-year-old actor is nursing a broken heart after his longtime girlfriend, Rosalind Ross, ended their relationship. Insiders say he fought hard to make it work, but he's already said to be looking for his next partner, openly talking about wanting to find someone in her 30s who is ready to start a new chapter and have his 10th child. Mel is already the proud father of 9 children with 3 different partners. He welcomed his first 7, now ranging in age from 45 to 26, with his first wife, Robin Moore. The couple were married for an impressive 29 years before Robin filed for divorce in 2009. Almost immediately after separating from Robin, Mel began dating Russian songwriter and pianist Oksana Grigorieva, and by the end of 2009 they welcomed a baby girl named Lucia. But while things looked promising on the surface, deep cracks had already begun to show. By 2010, the relationship completely imploded and became one of Hollywood's most explosive public scandals. The breakup turned extremely messy when Grigorieva filed for a restraining order against Gibson, accusing him of domestic violence. Things escalated further when private audio recordings of their heated arguments were leaked online, giving the public an unfiltered listen to the actor shouting and using highly abusive language. Gibson later admitted to slapping Grigorieva once with an open hand during an argument, strongly denying that he punched her or caused serious injury. He also denied breaking her teeth, stating that a dental veneer had simply fallen off. Their legal battles continued for years, covering both custody and financial disputes. Although Mel initially agreed to pay her $750,000 as part of their settlement, Grigorieva ultimately forfeited $500,000 of that amount after breaching her confidentiality agreement by giving a public interview. Following the lengthy custody battle, Mel eventually found love again when he began dating equestrian and screenwriter Rosalind Ross in 2014. 3 years later, they welcomed a son named Lars, and things appeared stable for over a decade. Around this same period, Mel also managed a professional comeback when Hacksaw Ridge won 2 Oscars, helping him slowly step away from the Hollywood blacklist. But by the end of 2025, Mel confirmed that he and Rosalind had officially split, leaving him single once again. Now Mel is also facing a deeply personal heartbreak of a different kind. He is said to be devastated by the sudden and tragic death of his former co-star and close friend, actress Nadia Fares, who passed away at the age of 57. Mel and Nadia had starred together in the 2022 thriller On the Line, and insiders claimed their close friendship had recently blossomed into a secret romance. Tragically, Nadia was found unconscious at the bottom of a swimming pool at a luxury gym in Paris and passed away from cardiac arrest after being placed in a coma. Insiders say Mel had exceptionally strong feelings for her, making her sudden passing an enormous loss. Even through this grief, Mel plans to stay strong, determined to get back out there, meet someone new, and continue living life entirely on his own terms. In the summer of 2006, Mel Gibson's life completely derailed during a late-night drive on the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu, California. It was just after 2 a.m. on July 28 when a local sheriff's deputy named James Mee spotted Gibson's car speeding at 87 miles per hour in a 45 miles per hour zone, prompting an immediate traffic stop. Things quickly went from bad to worse when the deputy administered a breathalyzer test. The results came back at 0.12% blood alcohol level. The moment Gibson was placed under arrest, one of Hollywood's most notorious PR disasters began. As he was being processed, the 50-year-old actor unleashed a barrage of deeply offensive anti-Semitic remarks that instantly shocked the entertainment industry and drew fierce condemnation from Jewish leaders worldwide. Months later, on October 10, 2006, Gibson spoke publicly about the incident for the first time during an exclusive interview with Diane Sawyer on ABC News. He apologized and called his own remarks despicable, describing the outburst as the senseless ramblings of a drunk. He insisted he was actively working to heal himself and address the pain he had caused others. Sawyer pressed him on the wave of Hollywood power players who had publicly called on studios to stop working with him. Gibson admitted the backlash made him feel sad, but acknowledged it was their choice to make. Despite the global fury, he remained firm that he would never stop creating, fully aware that everything he had built could disappear overnight, but hopeful that in time his actions would speak louder than his worst moment. The legal fallout came quickly. Gibson pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor count of driving with an elevated blood alcohol level and was sentenced to 3 years of probation along with a mandatory alcohol rehabilitation program. Speaking with Sawyer 65 days after his arrest, he shared that he had not touched alcohol since that night, calling it a poison, while being candid about how difficult sobriety remained. He explained that even the fear of losing your life or your family isn't always enough to stop an addict from drinking, calling that harsh reality the true hell of the disease. He told Sawyer that if your nature is to drink, you are completely defenseless against it on your own, and that survival requires reaching out to friends, loved ones, and ultimately something greater than yourself. This was not Mel's first battle with substance abuse. He had struggled with severe alcoholism and drug addiction in the past, managed to stay clean for years, then relapsed just a couple of months before the July arrest, a reminder of how quickly sobriety can slip away. Unfortunately, the high-profile arrest caused other dark stories from his past to resurface. In 2010, actress Winona Ryder gave a revealing interview to GQ magazine, alleging that Gibson's offensive behavior was not a one-time incident. She claimed that around 15 years prior, she and a close friend attended a Hollywood party where Gibson was heavily intoxicated. According to Ryder, he approached her friend, who is openly gay, and made a homophobic joke, then directed an anti-Semitic remark at Ryder when it came up that she was Jewish. She said she had tried to speak out in the 1990s but no one in Hollywood believed her. The story resurfaced in 2020 when Ryder repeated the same account to the Sunday Times. Gibson's team responded aggressively, flatly denying the accusations and calling them outright lies. Ryder quickly issued her own response, wishing Gibson well, but standing firmly by her story. She maintained that around 1996, she and her friend Kevin Aucoin were on the receiving end of his hateful words, a painful and vivid memory she said she would never forget, and concluded that true amends require accepting full responsibility for one's behavior.